Hi everyone! Today is day 6 of launching your writing workshop, and we are going to talk today all about conferring, one-on-one conferring. I'm going to bring back some of my mentors that I shared with you earlier. Lucy Calkins, Art of Teaching Writing. Don Graves, Fresh Look at Writing. Katie Woodray, Wondrous Words. How's it going? Carl Anderson and Roy Peter Clark, Free to Write. So I want to just mention them because I'll be talking about them throughout this video. So we talked yesterday about the writing process, and the day before about volume, stamina, and independence, both really, really important. But thinking about our day when we talked about volume, stamina, and independence, the idea of really of making sure our kids feel very supported and very independent. And so one of the big things we talked about is that we're trying to build stamina, and we're trying to celebrate that stamina, and we are also writing with our kids to transition them from the rug to writing time, right? So in the first few days of school, probably you're building stamina, and your writing workshop is about 5, 6, 7 minutes long. Probably not really enough time to do any kind of conferring. You might have time to do like a quick compliment, table compliment, or a quick, mid-workshop interruption compliment. But you probably don't have the time to confer yet. You want to start conferring when your kids are really going strong at 10 minutes plus in their writing, without any interruption, without any hands raised, without them getting up. The whole idea of that being the space, silent, self-reliant, or seated, silent, self-reliant. So when that's happening for 10 minutes and more plus, that's when you can start your conferring. And maybe even at 7 minutes, depending, because one of the things I recommend in my unit that I've written about launching the writing workshop, first 20 days, is I recommend doing what I would call a compliment conference. And a compliment conference lasts 3 to 5 minutes. So that means that you need to have stamina, the kids need to have writing stamina for, probably 7, 8 minutes or more before you can get up and do a compliment conference. So some things to consider. When you're doing a compliment conference, or when you're conferring any time with your kids throughout your school year, it is so important to be really, really present in that moment. And so when you say I'm getting up and I'm going to sit next to you, you really are honoring that writer. And you want to make sure that that writer feels your presence. Having a conference is one of the best ways to lift a writer's confidence and engagement and motivation and excitement around writing. And when you have a conference and you look to the writer and say, what work are you doing today as a writer? And then you look across the room and say, hey, Hayden and Danielle, sit down over there. So what work are you doing today as a writer? That writer doesn't feel very respected, doesn't feel like you really are in it for them, or that you care about what they're writing. And you know that you have been encouraging, and you will encourage throughout the year, for kids to write with all their heart and soul. And so if we're going to get kids to write with all their heart and soul, we better really pay attention to the things that they're writing about. We know kids write about loss, write about divorce, write about moving, write about parents being in jail. They write about hard stuff. Unfortunately, they have hard lives. They're people. And life is hard. And that's the beauty can be one of the most beautiful things about writing workshop, is that you have this place to kind of figure out the hard stuff. But then we, as educators, as teachers, we need to be present and in the moment when we're having that conference. So the other thing that's really important is I I recommend the teacher goes to the writer. Sometimes teachers pull writers and they sit in a special area, which can feel sort of nice and like you have your own special private, area. I believe that it's important for the kids to see your presence and feel your presence throughout the sea of your workshop, and that you sitting next to one writer helps to give maybe other writers that are sitting nearby some ideas. Certainly, this conference is going to be with this sole writer, but if other kids listen in, that could be really helpful for them that day. And then the other thing is they just feel your presence. There's less movement. When one person gets up, then another person gets up, then another person gets up, and pretty soon you have a line at the restroom. It just feels as if everybody's engaged and writing and working. So I like to go to the writer. I like to go to their space. There's something I think really empowering for that writer to say, I'm coming to your space, you're not coming to my space. I don't want to take them to my desk. I don't want them over at my desk. I want to do anything I can to make them feel as if they have as much power as I do in this thing called writing. And there are little things that can change the dynamics in that. One being standing up. So that's the other thing I want to do is I want to bring a chair and I want to sit down next to that writer. When I first started teaching, I always knew that, I know Mary Osborne taught me this, that it was really important to be close proximity to the writer. And oftentimes I would squat down next to the writer and I'd have a conference, and as you get older, squatting's not as easy for that length of period of time. But I've come to realize that I think that it's not just even if I was 25 doing this, I would want to bring a chair. A chair says to that writer, I am sitting and I'm staying, and you're the only person that matters. You're the most important person that matters in this next few minutes that we're together. And so I feel like a chair means that I'm going to stay and you have my utmost attention during this time. And I am so incredibly honored to have this opportunity with you. And I feel like one thing that Roy Peter Clark certainly taught me, and definitely Carl Anderson, is that it should really feel like a conversation, like it's sort of writer to writer having this conversation. Roy definitely made me feel that way in all of his work with me, and just this idea of just talking about your writing to an adult and a kid, but it's going to feel like just two colleagues chit-chatting about your writing. One of the things I think conferring, no matter what, is the hardest thing to do in writing workshop. We're hoping to meet kids in their zone of proximal development and then push them and grow them to the next place in their journey. And that can be really difficult. And it's really difficult because we're approaching this writer and we know a lot about writing, or a little bit about their teaching of writing. We're learning, and we know as much as we can about this writer, but really and truly in a conference it should always be the writer's agenda. It's so interesting. I feel like we teach a mini lesson, a whole group mini lesson. We name the teaching point. It's our agenda. Mid-workshop interruption, we interrupt, we notice, we say out loud. That comes from the teacher. The teaching share often comes from the teacher. So it's very easy to give the message to writers in your classroom, like, as soon as I come over to confer with you, I will tell you what you should be doing in your writing. And I never want that to be that message for writers. I always want them to know that they have a lot of tools in their backpack of writing tools, and that they can pull for them, and that they know so much in the world of writing that they can, when you sit down next to them, they can decide how the agenda is going to go. They're going to set the agenda, not the teacher. And that's something that is difficult, because then we have to offer support. Oftentimes that may feel like, ooh, I can't really prepare for that. But I will say to you this. One of the things I always think about with Graves is that Don Graves always said that the energy of the writer in a conference, the energy of the writer should always go up. And if the writer feels more confident, feels like this was a positive experience, you've done your job as a teacher. And when I sit back and think about it, I'm like, as a kid, I don't recall ever having one single conference, not one single conference with the teacher. And if I got any feedback, it definitely wasn't positive. So that helps to, when I was first starting, for sure, it helped to sort of ease my mind when I did this very difficult thing, like sitting next to a writer and thinking like, how am I going to teach them? I don't know what to teach. So I knew that I could compliment them and that I could make them feel better. And I'm going to give you a couple of ways in which you can do that for sure, like Graves says, the energy will go up. So, the first thing that I think the thing that helps me the most in conferring is having a structure, an architecture, if you will. And Calkins definitely has a structure that she's worked with for many, many years. And so one of the things that I recommend is that with teachers in this launching unit, that they take on part of the structure, not the whole. And I've done a little bit of thinking around the compliment piece of it, so that it feels like, that actually feels like you've got some meat in there. So the structure is, at least for a compliment conference, is research the writer, decide what you're going to teach, and then give them a compliment. So let me break that down for you. So first, we want to research the writer, right? Well, for as long as I can remember, and I feel like it's probably Calkins, Graves, Roy Peter Clark, Mary Osborne, all rolled up in one. This sentence, what work are you doing as a writer, has been the most powerful way in my mind to do research. And this past year, I was honored and just thrilled, and had just an amazing year, and going to continue to have hopefully many more amazing years with a district in Maryland, Wycomico County. And one thing that we talked about is, why can't we just say, what work are you doing as a writer? One of the things that I like about that statement is it says you're expected to do work. You're expected to know some craft around writing, and you're expected to use it in your writing, and you're expected to see growth in your writing. And then what work are you doing as a writer? When you use the word writer, you are automatically saying, I believe in you. This is what I'm giving you. This is who you are. You're a writer. You walk into this classroom, and that's who you are the second you step foot in here. So if you had any thoughts prior to this, just by calling you a writer means that you are a writer. I'll never forget one of my favorite principals I've ever worked with, Amanda Blatter. She works, I'm so sorry, I don't know the name of the school, in the Bronx. But she was at PS 109 in the Bronx. She's not there anymore. That's where she was when I was there. And one of her teachers, Larry May, I believe, was just blown away by that idea of calling kids writers. And when I came in and I first worked with them, 10 years ago, whatever it was, he just was like, oh my goodness, that's the best thing ever. I'm going to call all my kids writers tomorrow. And the next week I came back for professional development, and he was going on and on and on and on and on about how great he felt about calling them writers. So it's really special. It can be this sort of like, yep, I'm telling you this is what you are because this is what I believe in you. It's a given. As soon as you walk in my room, it's a given. That's who you are. You have a notebook, you have a heart, you have a brain, you have a pen, you're good. You're a writer. So now, sometimes when you get stuck, I believe we can train kids to answer that question. You do it over and over and over again, and you talk to them in a teaching share what your job is and what my job is as far as the conference goes. You teach them that when I ask you what work are you doing as a writer, you answer that with things like, I am trying to say more in my sketch, or I'm trying to say more in my writing. I'm trying to elaborate the heart of the story, or I'm trying to figure out the perfect ending for my piece. So And then one thing that's really important in that research part is to say, show me where you're doing that. A lot of times teachers say to me, you didn't even read the piece. How could you not read the piece? You've got to read the piece. When I read a student's piece, a writer's piece, I get lost in that piece. And I begin to teach to that writing and not the writer. Remember Calkins' words, one of my, I think, most important words that she's ever said, phrases that she's ever said. It's important that we are teaching to the writer, not the writing. So when I read too much of the writing, I get lost in the writing and I worry about what I think it needs to be done in this piece. And then it becomes about this single piece and not this person. So I want to sit back and I want to listen and I want to be completely engaged and I want them to tell me their agenda, and I want to then when they say, like, I'm trying to work on my lead. Oh, really? Can you show me that part? Can you show me where you're trying to stretch out the heart of the story? Can you show me where you're doing that lead? Just read that part for me right there. And then I can zoom in on that. It's the writer's agenda, and I can decide and determine, like, can I lift the level of that? Any skill I could probably lift the level of, or do I feel like there's something more urgent and I need to figure out how to think about something else that I might teach, which, by the way, we're not going to talk about that now because we're not going to think about teaching in a compliment conference, but I think it's so important to try as much as you can to let it be the writer's agenda. Sometimes I say, and I'll never forget this, when I was working in my friend Christy, second grade teacher in Worcester County, and I was working in her classroom, and this young little boy writer was saying to me, I'm working on my spelling. And I said, okay, great. Can you look over your writing and can you find a word that was hard for you to spell? I'm always trying to get to them to think about the hard work that they're doing. So show me where you're doing that. And when I look over my shoulder and I see that he's got all of his words spelled correctly, I'm like, that's not really hard work for you. But he didn't know how to answer that question. He was approximating it. So I had to nudge him to think about and analyze, which is this research part is probably one of the most important parts of the conference, because you're getting kids to really think about the work that they are doing as a writer. Once they know it, they can do it and increase their writing. So I said to him, could you find a word that was really tricky for you, that, you did some really hard work on? He's looking, he's like, I can't find anything. I'm like, I think you're doing really well with your spelling. You feel proud of it? So let's think a little bit deeper about something that's hard for you, something that you really want to do, some really good writing work that could be a good goal for you. So that's maybe when you get into some of the other kinds of questions that you might ask, like, what's your plan? What's your goal? What even are you proud of? If you feel like the writer really is like feeling a little deflated and needs some boost right there, I always like that as well. But in the end, I want to try to get used to, like, what work are you doing as a writer, and kids being able to look over their writing or think about the missed, I'm interrupting them in the middle of their writing. What are they doing and how can I support them, right? And so that's why at that moment I'm deciding. And when I'm deciding, I need to make sure that I am present and in the moment, and sitting says I'm staying, and making sure that, when I'm present and in the moment, I am saying to everybody else in the class, I trust you. You got this. You're going to figure it out. You're going to problem solve. And I'm saying to this writer sitting next to me that you are the most important person in this moment. And every single child in the classroom is going to get so many conferences throughout the year. So kids will know, like, okay, I will have my turn and I can't wait for that moment, but I'm going to make sure that I respect that moment. So when it's my turn to have it, I will give that same courtesy to the next writer. So one of the things that, so you want to research what work you're doing as a writer, be in the moment, because you're trying to decide what are you going to compliment and what are you going to teach, and it might be one of the same. Now today we're just talking about compliment conferences, so we're going to stop after the compliment. But one of the things that Calkins taught me is that a compliment should be rich and full. It probably should be a paragraph of words. So I struggled with that, and so one of the things that I did was I decided to give it a little bit of a structure. So the first part of the first I want to ask, can I give you a compliment? And you know what? I used to all the time give kids compliments, and sometimes they didn't know it. And then I thought, you know what? I want them, how great it is, and I will just tell you this. I did a lot of work with compliment conferences in Denver, and I'll never forget when Allison, at the end, my last day there, she stood up and she just said, Christy, can I give you a compliment? And by the way, Allison, it wasn't mocking. This teacher is one of the most beautiful teachers I've ever had the privilege to work with. And when she said, can I give you a compliment? It just was the most moving experience ever. So know that it is really special to hear something positive about the work that you're doing. And sometimes people say things that positively, and we don't even know. All we hear is the things that are happening that's negative. And so I think that's the other reason why it's so important what Calkins says, and what Peter Johnston says in Choice Words is words matter, and the way we say things matter. And so Calkins is saying it needs to be a paragraph. Kids need to feel like their writing is the best writing in the world, and this is where they should be in their, in this moment, and they should be proud of that. And that the energy, like Graves says, should go up for the writer. So I feel like it's really important to name it and say, can I give you a compliment? And that sort of that's sort of the first part of my compliment. So it moves me from the research to the compliment. So I say to the writer, can I give you a compliment? And then I name the skill or strategy or the work that the writer is doing. Oh my goodness, Hayden, wow, can I give you a compliment? I noticed in your writing that you really stretched out the tension in your writing. Like that moment when you said something to your mom that you regretted and you were mean to her. Whoa, I could feel your heart beating. And I could feel like I was like, oh my goodness, I was sweating for you, and that part where you described like your body and really like the actions that your body was going through in that moment, that's incredible. So really your little bit, and what you did was you slowed it down, like little bit actions. Your heart was racing, sweat was dripping off your brow. Your face got angry. Like 3 sentences of action slowing down that moment and telling the reader how tense this moment was. So I name what the writer's doing, and then I say why it's important. So Hayden, anytime so this is important, Hayden, sorry. So this is important, Hayden, because you want to bring your reader with you, standing right in your shoes with you, feeling your feelings, thinking your thoughts. You want them to be like right there with almost their heart racing with you. And so when you stretch out exactly and slow down the moment like that with little bitty actions, the reader can really feel right there with you. So then the fourth part, tell the writer they can do this work in any writing. So we want to make this to not feel about just this piece, but pieces that are the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. So then to say like, so Hayden, anytime in your writing, know that this is a great strategy. 3 sentences of little bitty action that really shows the tension in that moment can make the world of the difference for the reader. So you can do that in any writing that you're doing. Okay, thanks. So you see, like when you have sort of these 4 parts, you definitely have a paragraph of words that you're sharing. And that writer, the other thing too is the writer's energy should certainly go up for sure. But you're trying to be as specific as you can with naming the compliment. Sometimes you don't know. Okay? Katie Woodray says, make it up. especially for the why part. Sometimes you don't know why, so make it up. If you use the same thing that you used in the conference before, doesn't matter. The more you practice, the more you're going to get better, and the more you'll have more tools in your toolkit, and you will be able to know the reasoning for that strategy and the impact it has, right? So try not to worry about that. But if you get in the conference and you're like frozen and you're like, oh, I don't know what to compliment, I have no idea what to compliment. One of the things that Graves says that I thought I've always carried with me, I know Mary Osborne talked about this, is you could receive the piece. Your kids are writing in really vulnerable ways. Just receive it. Wow. Thank you for sharing that moment about you and your mom. That's probably a hard thing for you to write about, and for you to then share it with me really shows the truth that you want to get across. And I just feel so honored and touched that you would trust me with that. So I think receiving the piece and just like talking a little bit about the content and the impact it had on you, maybe at the emotional level, that's another thing you can do if you're like, I really have no idea the craft moves that this writer did, so I can't really compliment them. But then take that piece, bring it to your PLC meetings, talk to your colleagues about it, and it's a great way to get discussion around what are some things that I could compliment, or what are things that you're noticing about this writing, so you have tools the next time you go to confer. That's a compliment conference, and that's what I recommend in that launching unit in those first 20 days. Research the writer, decide what you're going to compliment, give them a compliment, make sure you say, can I give you a compliment? And within that compliment, say, what are you doing well, why it's important, do it again and again. And don't forget, really important that you completely give all of your attention to that writer. If you do, the energy will certainly go up. All right, thanks again for tuning in. Happy writing. Bye.